So we're just giving people a few minutes to join, but I think I'll start things off and just welcome everybody to this launch of dConnect, the Digital Health Innovation Hub at Dundalk IT. And I'd like to hand you over to the President of Dundalk IT, Michael Mulvey, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Angela, and congratulations again, by the way, on your appointment. So good morning, everybody. You're all most welcome. Thank you for coming along to attend this very important event for the region. So it gives me great pleasure to commence the launch of the dConnect project. This is a key collaboration among the public and private sectors within and across regions. The project it's building on the significant research and innovation strengths at Dundalk Institute of Technology and leveraging significant funding from the Regional Enterprise Development Fund and partnering benefactors. The dConnect project, it's a strong endorsement of the vision from the public-private partnership involved to develop the connected health and well-being ecosystem in the region. And we firmly believe this will be a catalyst for innovation in Indigenous companies, startups and existing businesses, and will continue to bring about positive transformation for our region by supporting job creation, enhancing leadership development, and creating opportunities for upskilling. It will ultimately improve the overall competitiveness of the North Leinster, South Ulster region, and indeed beyond that. So I want to take the opportunity to personally thank the department officials and Enterprise Ireland, and Aidan McKenna, Regional Director, joins us here today, for the commitments they have given through the Regional Enterprise Development Fund, and also to our strategic partner benefactors, without whose support the project could not have progressed. That's Louth County Council, Dundalk Enterprise Development Company, SurveySource, StatSports, Dundalk Credit Union, and Louth Enterprise Fund. Here at DKIT, we're committed to developing pillars of strength from our research and innovation activities. And this is a demonstration of a significant and worthwhile investment internally and externally in the connected health and well-being space in both infrastructure and program supports. Finally, I'd like to wish Aidan Brown, our Head of Innovation and Business Development, and the team he has assembled in dConnect that will be led by Dr. Angela Duffy, who has just opened the session, the dConnect Program and Business Development Director, all the success that this project deserves, and assure them that it has the full support of the DKIT leadership, myself and the leadership team. I'm confident that they have the potential to make a real and lasting impact on enterprise development at both regional and national level. So thank you. I wish you all well and hope you enjoy the remainder of this event. And I'm going to hand back over now to Aidan Brown.
Thank you very much, Michael. Good morning, everybody. My name is Aidan Brown, and I'm the Head of Innovation and Business Development, as Michael has said, at DKIT. I'm also delighted to be here today at what is a very special launch of the dConnect project initiative. Over the next few minutes, I plan to share what I believe is the key element of success we've had in bringing this project initiative to today's launch, and how we've cultivated it with the right vision and collaboration. Essentially, if you consider the digital and connected health and wellbeing areas, they're recognized as one of the fastest growing opportunity sectors. When you think about that, the questions you might ask yourself are, what might the concrete role of digital and connected health technologies in the future of medicine healthcare be? How will the patient journey change? And what are the promising advancements that we see in this area? What are the barriers to their success, and how can we help nurture them? As citizens, we can probably all relate to healthcare systems being under significant pressure with what seems like unrelenting and burgeoning demand even before COVID. We see increased incidence of chronic disease, and we've seen a crisis of cost effectiveness across healthcare systems. And then there's also the shifting demographic to contend with, particularly in developing nations where we've seen the aging population of 65 plus growing exponentially and estimated to grow threefold by 2050. So significant challenges. And it may be that the panacea to those woes may rest somewhat with digitizing health systems being a key component in advancing, tackling disease, instituting prevention, in health promotion, in rehabilitation, and into palliative care. And in this context, the digital health also has a really important role to play in improving the reach and the impact and the efficiency and the enhanced patient-centric services of any modern healthcare system. The global coronavirus pandemic has also shifted the context of digital health, having contributed to fast-tracking many digital healthcare opportunities, but also may have forced a taking of stock as to how our health systems can better embrace emerging technologies to leverage them for overall improvement of the patient interaction and their lives. And progressive healthcare providers are already on this trajectory, looking increasingly at digital healthcare to provide solutions as a key component to the collective effort to tackle improving healthcare provision in its widest sense. And with those progressive healthcare providers, there's also a fundamental shift moving the conventional model of healthcare towards more value-based care, such as care in the community. And it's increasingly self-evident that digital health is a means of making our healthcare systems even more patient-centric. And the challenge now is to move beyond an understanding of what's the promise of digital health to focus on tangible steps to accelerating its implementation. And we really see the dConnect project initiative as one spoke in that larger wheel to facilitate that acceleration. And just take a moment to step back in the journey to where we ended up today with the launch of the dConnect project. And the President, Michael Mulvey, mentioned this connected health and wellbeing as a pillar of DKIT's focus on research and innovation. And when I reflect on how we ended up here, it takes me back to the development of the DKIT strategic planning process and that development, and how we looked at our teaching and learning, our engagement, our research and innovation, and our economic development remit for the region. And when we took that objective look at ourselves, we asked, what can we bring to the table? What's our purpose? What's our goals? The skills we have, the resources we have, and of course, our systemic needs. And this has led to us developing a highly valuable kind of optimism, and one that's rested on a rock of clear, honest reflection and assessment. And in doing this, we recognized the significant opportunity to be leveraged with our track record in nurturing innovation and fostering growth for enterprises, particularly startups. We've supported in excess of 320 collaborative research projects with industry, over 1,660 entrepreneurs of various programs, and incubated over 210 companies on campus here. And we've seen a recent emergence of a solid foundation of startups in the connected health and wellbeing space that are engaging with us. And we've also reflected on the opportunity that we can leverage the significant track record we have nationally and internationally across 3 research centres. That is Regulated Software Research Centre, Smooth Muscle Research Centre, and the Network Casala Research Centre. And they've recently been umbrellaed under the banner of a Research Institute of Connected Health and Wellbeing that is creating significant critical mass and synergies across the research and support staff at DKIT. And if you consider those assets and you couple them with the regional, the national, and the international stakeholders that are eager to develop niche strengths and industry clustering, we knew we were onto something that could be large and a winning concept, and essentially had given us what you might term an earned optimism. And the birth of any project idea brings great intensity and great creative energy, and that creative energy can be infectious, particularly when that idea is shared with other parties. And bringing other parties into any idea is a must. We all would need collaboration. Every meaningful element of progress has happened because we've shared ideas with each other and collaborated to turn those into reality. And we realized we couldn't do this on our own. So with a lot of creative excitement with the project, we engaged on a broad validation process with startups, with existing SMEs, with multinational companies, with local and national government agencies, with investors and financiers, researchers, and with public, private and community healthcare providers. And this was on a national and an international basis. And our earned optimism received significant acknowledgement and validation and positivity and guidance to help us evolve this. And it reassured us that being on this ecosystem development pathway was correct and a substantial opportunity. And the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment and Enterprise Ireland too recognise the critical role of collaboration to drive innovation in the region and economic development. And the Regional Enterprise Development Fund was born out of that to support every region to build on its unique strengths and create sustainable high-value jobs. And with the support we had garnered from our validation, we took that opportunity with both hands. And under the banner of the dConnect project initiative, we are leveraging that funding to develop the foundations for this ecosystem in both infrastructure and program support, and we aim to transfer the business and economic landscape in this region to develop an internationally recognized research, innovation and learning hub on campus in the connected health and wellbeing space. And the efforts have paid off because we have a 4.7 million total project funding, and the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment and Enterprise Ireland are committed. As Michael, the President, outlined, my own organisation, dConnect, are committed. And I want to thank again, I can't thank enough, our strategic partner benefactors, Louth County Council, Dundalk Enterprise Development Company, Servisource, StatSports, the Dundalk Credit Union, and the Louth Enterprise Fund, without whose support, and that support is a 1 million in cash contribution, as well as in-kind contributions, the project could not have progressed. I think it was Warren Buffett was credited with coining the phrase that someone sitting in the shade under a tree today is because someone 20 years ago planted a seed. This initiative, the dConnect initiative, has the building blocks. It has the high density of actors and a track record. We have the infrastructure coming and the opportunity that brings with the physical proximity to create and stimulate greater collaboration. We have a really strong network of supporters in the region and beyond, and we have a great initial team to make this happen, led by Angela Duffy. The dConnect project initiative is therefore planting the seeds today that will help support great businesses, validate and commercialize a pipeline of products, services and business models and high value jobs for the future, and ultimately create more patient-centric opportunities. I'd like to thank everybody for coming on today, particularly the panel, and I'd like to wish you to enjoy the rest of the event. And I'll hand over now to Aidan McKenna, who's Enterprise Ireland Regional Director, Northeast, Northwest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aidan. Good morning, everyone. As Aidan mentioned, I'm the Regional Director for Enterprise Ireland in the Northeast and Northwest region. I'm actually really delighted to be participating in this launch event of dConnect Digital Health Innovation Hub in dCIT today, this morning. It's a great day for Dundalk, dCIT, the region, and indeed nationally. But maybe before I acknowledge the role of the key stakeholders and talk a little bit about the project, the potential impacts for the region, I want to spend a few minutes just to acknowledge the role of maybe the Regional Enterprise Development Fund in not only providing the funding for this project, but also for setting the bar for promoters to build such innovative and ambitious projects. It was February 2015, the government announced a regional competitive fund with the objective of supporting significant regional initiatives that could build on sectoral strengths, to better leverage identified resources to improve enterprise capability. Enterprise Ireland was asked to develop and manage this fund, and the Regional Enterprise Development Fund aimed to support initiatives that help strengthen regional ability to adjust and cope with potential effects of international economic changes that may impact on regions or sectors' performance nationally. Little did we realise that since the REDF launched, we've had the Brexit referendum, the UK exit of the customs union, the COVID-19 pandemic, and currently a major criminal cyber attack on our entire public health system. The reality is that economic and external challenges will continue, and as a result, we need our Indigenous enterprises to be resilient, agile, and innovative in how we respond. This scheme, the REDF scheme, set out to support particular collaborative and innovative initiatives that could make a significant impact on the enterprise base, not only in the regions, but across the entire country, and build unique USP capabilities that would allow growth. Also, one of the overarching aims of the scheme was to drive jobs, enterprise development, job creation throughout all the regions in Ireland. To date, the fund has allocated over 116 million to a range of strategic change projects. These are, and also regional strengthening projects located in every region of the country. This particular project, the dConnect project, was successful in a competitive call in call 3. And it was in the very competitive category of strategic change. It received, as Aidan mentioned, 3.7 million in grant support against overall project costs of 4.7 million. The project sets out to transform the entrepreneurial research and innovation landscape, not only of the Northeast through the launch of this Connected Health and Innovation Hub, but also to support startups, corporates and researchers through the benefits of co-location, stimulating cross-fertilization and idea generation between industrial partners, leading researchers and creating high potential businesses and high value jobs. Over the years, Enterprise Ireland has acknowledged the role of collaboration and innovation in making companies more resilient. Our statistics show that those that collaborate and invest in R&D win more international business, are more profitable and are more resilient to those international shocks that we just mentioned. This proposed dConnect Centre aims to be a centre of excellence with national and international reach. It'll be an innovation and enterprise hub to not only nurture new technology, business development, collaboration and R&D in the connected health and wellbeing space. The concept of the hub is to encapsulate under one roof researchers, corporate startups and SMEs working collaboratively. And I think it's what Aidan has set out is really ambitious, but also very realistic in terms of what it can achieve. One of the key ingredients to making this project a success in the competitive bid was the stakeholders who offered support. Both the President and Aidan Brown have referenced who they are. I don't need to mention them again, but it definitely is important to recognise their significant contribution to this project. It's that industry and stakeholder collaboration that really put this project, set it apart from maybe others in the competitive call. Not only the financial contribution of those stakeholders, but also their willingness and partnership in making the project a reality, bringing industry and stakeholder engagement was also critical as well. Of course, then, the team that put together this project, I have to acknowledge as well. This team also has, as led by Aidan Brown, Tim McCormick, the President, the Vice President, and all the research schools in DKIT. They have a very strong track record in nurturing innovation and fostering growth. As Aidan mentioned, they have in excess of over 300 collaborative projects between DKIT research and industry. They've supported over 1,600 entrepreneurs, and they've incubated over 200 companies since it was established. So we come with a very strong track record. DKIT has also, as Aidan mentioned, took a number of strong research groups and put them under one Institute of Connected Health. And I thought that was a real key building block to form the basis of this project going forward. So they have a strong track record. You know, the researchers in DKIT have drawn down innovation funding in excess of 65 million, which is which is extremely big in this space and has been very successful on a national basis as well. So the other part of the Regional Enterprise Development Fund was to make an impact in the economic sense. And this project hopes to contribute significantly, not only to the region and the border region, but also the entire country as well. It has the potential to create up almost 500 jobs, both direct and indirect, in the next 5 years, creating up to 28 new businesses, and also engage with 70 organizations providing technology transfer, research and innovation support and learning support in the process. So it has huge potential. The space is going to be developed on campus as an extension to the Regional Development Centre. And I think it's going to be fantastic when we can actually go there physically and cut the ribbon when it's when the construction is completed. Finally, all I want to do is to wish Dr. Angela Duffy and her team and all the supporting partners, the researcher staff at DKIT, all the success in leading this project in the future, and to reiterate Enterprise Ireland's continued support in making that a success. So Angela, back to you, and thank you again.
Thanks very much, Aidan, and thanks to both Aidan McKenna and Aidan Brown and Michael Mulvey for their kind, I suppose, well wishes and the background there. It's great to be in a position to bring something to the region. And I'm a Monaghan woman originally, so coming close to home. My mother's delighted. So I've asked a panel of, I guess, experts in Ireland on digital health and connected health to join me today. And I'd welcome them to join here now. So I have Anita Finnegan from Novalia, Jim O'Donoghue, President of S3 Connected Health, and Lorcan Walsh from Novartis. And I'll just say to the audience, as the panel are speaking, if you go to the Q&A section at the bottom of Zoom, or it may be on a mobile, maybe at the top of your Zoom panel, to just pop the questions for the panel in there so that they're ready when we come to the end of discussions. So maybe I'll ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and their businesses a little bit further. And we'll do ladies first. Anita, I'd like to give some background on yourself and the business.
Thanks, Angela. Good morning, everybody. My name is Anita Finnegan, and I am a co-founder and CEO of Novalea. So Novalea have very close ties here. We literally came through the ranks of Dundalk Institute of Technology, directly a spin out from the Regulated Software Research Centre, and also followed through the ranks into the Incubation Centre, the Regional Development Centre. Novalea specialise in connected medical device cybersecurity. So we've developed software solutions to automate the process for medical device manufacturers to conduct a cybersecurity assessment of their devices and demonstrate evidence of having done so to regulators under the requirements of new regulations globally, really, in the US, Canada, Australia, and Ireland, or Europe. So my own background, I have a PhD in the area of medical device cybersecurity. During the time that I was doing that, I also had the fortunate opportunity to be able to work with and author a number of medical device cybersecurity standards, which have been adopted by regulators and specifically called out in the US by the FDA for medical device manufacturers. So we're there essentially to support the development of secure medical devices. And we're also now starting to work with healthcare providers in developing solutions to ensure that connected medical devices that are being brought in and deployed in hospital environments are done so given consideration to the security fit of a product for a specific environment. So I'm very excited to be here this morning, particularly at the launch of the dConnect, and looking forward to the panel discussion. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Anita. Maybe Jim, if you'd like to give the audience more of a background on yourself and S3 Connected Health.
Sure, thanks, Angela. Great to be here. Good morning, everyone. So I'm president of S3 Connected Health, and S3 Connected Health creates digital health solutions. We've done that across about 20 different disease areas, ranging from diabetes to cardiovascular to immunology to oncology. Some of those digital health solutions involve wearable devices, implantable devices. Some of them involve an area called digital therapeutics, which is using software interventions to treat and intervene and support patients. We typically co-create those solutions in cooperation with either pharmaceutical companies or medical device companies. And then we create them, develop them, deploy them and operate them around the globe. I think we've deployed services in about 40 countries so far. We have about 200 people in the organization spread over Ireland and Dublin, where we're headquartered, in Poland and in the US. Thanks, Angela.
That's great. Thanks very much, Jim. And Lorcan, you have a unique data relevant role in Novartis. You want to tell us more about yourself and that role?
Thanks very much, Angela. My name is Lorcan Walsh. I am the Digital Endpoint Capability Center lead with Novartis. I work within the Global Drug Development function, which is our function that leads the phase 2B and the phase 3 clinical trials. Here we're looking to bring digital health technologies into those phase 2B and phase 3 trials, really to aim to get and to support primary and secondary endpoints within those trials, and also to work towards label claims using these digital health technologies. We work across various different therapeutic areas, and in global clinical trials, this would include neuroscience, ophthalmology, respiratory, oncology, etc. The trials that we would engage in would be global in nature, so there may be trials as large as 20 to 30 sites across 20 to 30 sites globally.
That's great. Thank you very much. And we'll put all the panelists on screen now to discuss some of the questions. So I guess there's a bit of a range of experience and background there, and certainly from a smaller to a larger size organization. I guess, you know, Aidan mentioned this earlier, rapid change in the development of healthcare and the digitization of healthcare. We're moving away from the use, I guess, solely of pharmaceuticals, medical devices and procedures to remote monitoring, and digital diagnosis was mentioned, and patient care at home. What do you guys see, you know, in terms of this being an advantage? We have, you know, healthcare professionals with more access to patient data, and maybe they are in themselves more accessible to patients. And again, the patients with their own access to their data and the status of their health. What are the main advantages that you see with the digitization of healthcare? I might put that to Anita to answer that.
Sure. So yeah, to reiterate what you say, Angela, there are significant benefits. You know, the industry has gone through a transformation, a significant transformation over the last decade or so, where we essentially transitioned from what was primarily a standalone medical device industry or healthcare industry to now an industry that's becoming more and more connected. And the benefits there, so from a hospital's perspective, obviously it's a very attractive business model for them because it improves operational efficiencies. So connected devices, digital technologies allow clinicians and physicians real-time access to patient data. And that faster access to patient data significantly improves, like I said, operational efficiencies. It means faster data analysis, quicker diagnoses for patients, and quicker treatments, which in the overall scheme of things basically means improved outcome for patients. So essentially, the sooner a patient can receive that treatment that they need, the sooner they can go home. And again, wrapping that back to operational efficiencies. And then expansion beyond the healthcare delivery setting or the hospital setting. From an accessibility perspective, healthcare services are now outside of the walls of the hospital, and it's much needed to be outside of the walls of the hospital. And as Aidan mentioned earlier, the pandemic has taught us why and how we need to be able to extend beyond that environment. So remote patient monitoring enables patients suffering even from chronic diseases to avoid frequent visits to the hospital to their physicians. So cardiac patients, diabetes patients in particular, they can benefit from this type of technology where essentially it allows patients to stay away from the hospital environment and have those fewer interactions with their clinicians and the hospitals. So all of that, you know, essentially alleviates pressure to have people and patients in a given environment to receive diagnosis or treatments while reducing costs associated with healthcare delivery.
I guess there's that piece around costs and efficiency, and there's also solutions that are, I guess, not as focused on the patient, you know, operational efficiency and, you know, payment systems, appointment systems, and movement of people through the system. So those digital technologies in use within healthcare are also providing benefits. Jim, you're heavily involved actually in producing some great software solutions. Can you talk a little bit more about what you see as the positives?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you just think about it at a top level, I mean, mostly what healthcare systems are trying to do essentially is to meet what they call the quadruple aim, which is around improving outcomes at a lowering costs, or at least at a sustainable cost, while improving patient experience and including improving clinician experience. And really digital health and digital health solutions are kind of a tool in enabling that to happen, because we all know there's great therapies being created, but some of them are really expensive. How do you make the trade-offs between, you know, providing that very expensive therapy versus providing more basic services to a broader population, right? So there are constraints when you're trying to, you know, balance the needs of these of the overall goal. And what I think digital health and technology can help with is essentially as a tool to improve that equation and improve the trade-offs. So what can digital health do for you? And Anita has touched on them, but essentially it can improve access. As we all know, we've now moved from, demanding that we kind of see our clinicians face to face to being happy to see them, and maybe even happier to see them over video. So it can improve access. It can reduce costs in terms of monitoring people with chronic conditions. We know that people with chronic conditions, take up probably about 75% of the healthcare budget in most countries. And most of that healthcare budget gets spent essentially on the issues that come up when people come into hospital unexpectedly or as a result of an emergency. So again, what digital health can do in that case is to remotely monitor patients so that you can manage them better at home and prevent kind of serious episodes arising. And then there's this new areas like things like digital therapeutics, where you can use software, use digital to provide interventions to patients where maybe there's scarce resources around, scarce clinical resources to deliver those treatments. An example of that is digital cognitive behavioral therapy, which has now become very popular. There's a number of Irish companies involved in that as well, like Silvercloud, for example, who have a treatment for patients with mental health. And if that treatment can be delivered digitally, at least if part of the treatment can be delivered digitally, again, it increases access for patients, and you avoid having these very long waiting lists where you're waiting for access to scarce human resources. So digital health, I think, really is a tool to help us kind of meet these kind of overall constraints that health systems face.
That's great. And I think, from a provider perspective, and you've been in there providing some solutions, I guess, to other players, and Novartis, a large player, definitely looking at this in terms of data and digital. What do you see in terms of change and advantages? Because you've been providing in there. How has your services and your products and business changed in the last number of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting question, Joe, and building upon Jim and Anita's points there. These kind of digital technologies can help us to reduce patient burden, so keep patients at home for longer where they want to be, potentially when they engage within the clinical trials context as well, ask them to come into clinics to do those assessments less often. Can we begin to collect those data at home? I think that's where this becomes quite interesting. It allows us to really understand how can we both measure outcomes better than we've traditionally done them for patients, and potentially improve those outcomes, and potentially do this improve access as well to these types of therapies, and all the while hopefully reducing cost. I think is the big thing. One of the challenges that we have within our kind of clinical trials context is one where we're looking to collect data from patients. Those trials may have patients, up to 1,000 patients per trial. We might be running several trials across the evolution of a certain compound. So we need to get access to patients globally for this. We need to be able to engage with patients across maybe up to 50 countries for some of the trials that we're currently looking at. And obviously digital technologies are mechanisms to start to pull in these data to see is this therapy effective or not. One of the things that this area is moving towards as well is that we're able to collect more objective, more quantifiable, and potentially more frequent data. Instead of asking patients to come into a clinical trial once a month or once every 2 months, we can now ask them to perform instrumented tests at home. We could potentially ask them to go into their local Specsavers or their local pharmacy and do tests in there if we need to have monitored tests. Particularly for, I suppose, 2 cases that we can think of. One where we have very rare diseases that we're looking to produce therapies for. So patients, if we're looking, for example, for patients who have never undergone a treatment for a therapy before, potentially we have to go to quite remote places to get access to those patients. And so how do we do that effectively is one question. And the second is, how do we make sure that we're not providing or placing undue burden on the patient, and as well as that their family when they come into these clinical trials. If we have, for example, within Ireland, an indication that's looking at reduced sight, maybe AMD, we might be asking patients to come up to a clinic once a month. Does that mean that the patient needs to get one of their family members to drop them up to the hospital once a month? And is that fair on the patient? from our perspective, does that mean that we're going to find it harder to get access to those patients? And so we see kind of lots of advantages across these different mechanisms for these digital health technologies.
Yeah, so there should be, I suppose, advantages for the patient. I guess in general, though, there's going to be challenges. You know, with everything as you evolve and change, you'll have issues that arise with something new. And you maybe thinking about this, Lorcan, you know, is there a risk that there's going to be too much data? Even large companies, you know, face the big data challenge, you know, to kind of delve deep and gain useful insights. You know, even if the healthcare practitioners and the nurses and doctors have patient data, will be overwhelmed by it. Will they be able to analyze it and actually be able to get the information that's useful in a timely manner? And, you know, obviously there's concerns around the flow of data. You know, recent attacks will show that, and how can you protect that data? So those are some of the issues. Can you see or foresee other issues that might arise? Maybe Lorcan from your end.
Yeah, I think there's probably two things that I'm thinking about in terms of issues around digital health technologies at the moment. One is when we're starting to look at this globally, what standards are we looking at to start to pull these data in? Some of the challenges that we have is that we're running trials across, as I was mentioning earlier, maybe 50 countries, and that we have different regulatory landscapes across each of those trials. So when we go to bring a medical device into Asia versus Canada versus the US versus Europe and different countries within Europe, there may be kind of different standards that we need to adhere to as part of this. And this is all changing at the moment now with MDD and MDR. Which is providing a little bit of uncertainty this week for us. There's also even logistical challenges of getting those digital health technologies into those countries, getting it past each of the different IRBs or ethics committees. There's a lot of kind of on the ground challenges that we have. One of the other big challenges as well that I see for digital health technologies is around the path for reimbursement of these technologies. When we go to develop these digital health technologies and get those used in practice, how do you make sure that this is equitable for any of the companies that are going into this space, particularly when we start to think about startups? So I think for me, those are kind of the two big things that we really need to focus on.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. You know, we hear this word interoperability quite a lot. So systems not talking to each other and people working in silos. You can see it ourselves at dConnect, an awful lot of businesses doing the same thing or very similar solutions. You know, different countries, even in the same country. How do we manage that piece, you know, where there's continuity of care, you know, even within a hospital system or a country? Can systems talk to each other? How do we get this problem solved, and where is it headed at the moment? Maybe Jim, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I suppose building a little bit on what Lorcan said as well. I mean, I think the three challenges around regulatory, reimbursement, and adoption. And the regulatory piece is complex, but it's kind of doable. You know, I mean, there are certain rules, they change like tomorrow to endure, but essentially, you know, you need to build up an expertise to be able to navigate regulatory systems in different countries if you want to deploy digital health solutions. That's one aspect. The second piece is reimbursement. So most healthcare systems haven't figured out how to exactly pay for these types of services. You know, if you have a digital health solution which is helping oncology patients and impact survival rates, for example, should that get paid or reimbursed at the same level that the new oncology drug should, or is, you know, should it get paid at the level of a supportive app from the App Store, right? So there's a massive kind of conversation there about how reimbursement should get structured, and most countries haven't figured that out yet. And then obviously, if there's no reimbursement, or if reimbursement is unclear, it's difficult for innovators to create new solutions in this space because they don't know how they're going to get paid. But actually, the third bit is the more complex bit in a sense, which is adoption, and that relates to issues like they're talking about, which relates to interoperability. But essentially, at a more fundamental level, I think it's about health systems are generally change averse, right? And for good reasons. You know, if you're going to be looking after people's healthcare, then you shouldn't just be changing things willy-nilly, and there needs to be good evidence behind new things that you decide to do. And clinicians, again, by their nature, by their training, they are risk averse as well. So they're a little bit wary about it and wary about changing the way they've done things that have worked in the past. Patients are also, a stakeholder in this, obviously, and very important in it. And in a sense, I suspect they're probably the least change averse, right? Because we're all getting used to having to change lots of things in how we do and interact with the world. So I think the net result of that is essentially we've got the fast-moving technology innovation things that are possible, and kind of interacting with this healthcare system that's pretty change averse and risk averse, and also where you're trying to work through regulatory and reimbursement issues, and that's what makes it kind of challenging. It's what makes it kind of exciting as well. But I think that they're the main challenges that we need to kind of address.
Yeah, that's true, and I think it is often a long road. Particularly if you're talking about medical devices and anything pharmaceutical, the numbers of clinical trials and the amount of data that needs to be collected is enormous. But I think there's a hope that, particularly among earlier stage companies, that the path to maybe that regulatory approval and reimbursement is shorter. So there's positives in terms of it perhaps being a little bit different and shorter, yet there are some of those challenges around, well, unknowns in terms of how it'll be regulated, new regulation here in Europe, but also even then to reimbursement where it fits, and getting paid for prevention. That's a really difficult one, as you mentioned, Jim, to figure out. So I guess, Anita, you've been an early stage company, and you're building out the company. Slightly different, but you are working in the healthcare space. What challenges have you seen, or what issues do you see out there?
Yeah, I guess to go back on an earlier point in terms of, I'll speak to this from a cybersecurity perspective. The industry has come up against significant change. A lot of that being positive around the connectivity side of things. But that transition from standalone devices to connected devices has presented itself a lot of challenges and risks within a hospital environment. And, Lurkin and Jim spoke to interoperability. They're very complex IT networks in terms of the fact that there are safety critical devices talking to other safety critical devices, but non-safety critical devices also talking to safety critical devices. So standardization from an interoperability perspective is just not there yet. And when we look at it from a cybersecurity perspective, well, essentially taking any device and placing that on a network, you are opening it up to a plethora of new attack vectors, cybersecurity attack vectors. And evidently, we've seen what's happening with the HSE at this time. We've seen incidents in the UK healthcare service with WannaCry. So ransomware, Conti ransomware, we're seeing more and more of these issues presented to our industry, which obviously is deemed as a safety critical industry. So with that, governments and regulators are working to essentially improve the cybersecurity posture of this industry. And that's no easy task, because we have the complexity in there where we're considering legacy products. So we could have imaging devices, radiotherapy devices that are in hospital environments, and they may have a lifespan of 10, 15, maybe 20 years. So we do see cases where those systems are running on non-supported operating systems. So as a means for risk mitigation for many healthcare providers, the only thing that can be done is a compensated mitigation where those products themselves are put onto a separate or segregated network environment. But in terms of new products, new medical device and connected device development, there are new regulations out there that puts onus on, well, it puts onus on all stakeholders basically in the environment in terms of developing products with security in mind. So for medical device manufacturers, they have to conduct a cybersecurity assessment of their products while they're developing the products and provide evidence of that to regulators. And that's now in effect here in Europe. FDA being the front runners there. The buck doesn't really stop there for medical device manufacturers, because essentially we can build a product today and we can stand over from a security perspective, but we literally cannot say the same thing about that same device tomorrow because of the evolving threat landscape that affects our products in this industry. So for that, medical device manufacturers need to continuously assess their products for new vulnerabilities. And so if we consider that in terms of a challenge for manufacturers of these products, it's quite a tall order to build in all of those new processes into the development life cycle of a product. The skill sets in the industry from a cybersecurity perspective haven't traditionally lived here because it wasn't felt that these devices were at risk from cybersecurity attacks. Obviously, we know that's different now. And the fact that regulation is evolving, the threat landscape is evolving, it's a continuous process. So very much a heavy lifting process for medical device manufacturers to integrate those processes and procedures and then report out to healthcare providers in terms of any potential risks or exploitable vulnerabilities in their products that could impact hospital networks, potentially patients and other devices on that network. So it is a complex place at the moment as the industry learns to better understand the complexity of the environment from all stakeholders' perspectives and try to maybe de-silo the environment between healthcare providers, medical device manufacturers, regulators, security researchers to find a unified approach to protecting the entire life cycle of a product when it comes to cybersecurity challenges.
I think that's really interesting. And, we are up and running a number of months, but that's one of the major challenges around, the regulation and security, data integrity. Those are the things that are most on people's minds, whether they're small or large companies. And it's very interesting actually to see the landscape change. And I've spoken with a lot of even large companies who, you're right, don't have the talent within, have been traditionally medical device engineering based companies, but now really all have smart devices or embedded software and beyond. So and some of the smaller businesses, a lot of them also with that same mix of product. Very, very interesting. How do we, and there's competition, of course, for this type of talent. And this is one of the questions I probably put to you before that, is there sort of now a competition between tech giants who are entering health, who actually have capabilities maybe in the tech space and security and data management versus maybe some of the more traditional healthcare companies? How do those healthcare companies start to ensure that they are as well equipped for some of these challenges? And maybe Lorcan, you're part of a large company. What do you see happening?
So what's happening with us presently is that we're entering into some very large partnerships within Novartis. You would have seen announcements that were made out between Novartis and Microsoft Research around the areas of AI and data science. There's partnerships between Novartis and AWS, partnerships with Tencent, and a few others that are ongoing at the moment. So we're really beginning to see how can we engage with those companies to try to understand how can Novartis become the leader in terms of data and digital from a health or a life science perspective. There are other mechanisms as well where we're looking to engage with the external ecosystem. So we would often work as well in a pre-competitive nature to advance the industry in certain key areas. And for that, we would use many different consortia. And examples of this is the IMI, the Innovative Medicines Initiative, where a number of different external stakeholders, industry stakeholders will come together and partner with academia to kind of say push forward a certain research topic. So we try to kind of really understand how do we play. What we're also seeing is, or at least I think Novartis's perspective here is that we're a leader within life sciences, and we have significant capabilities in terms of clinical knowledge and also in terms of regulations for bringing these medications to market and bringing them through the full clinical trial system that it needs, our drug development process that needs to happen. One of the other things that's happening at the moment as well is that we're starting to see this space heat up really in the startup scene for digital health technologies. which is great to see. And this is probably brought on through COVID in the last year. You know, I think nearly everyone I know has visited their GP over Zoom in the past year, which is a real transformation in 15 months when you think about it. Now, clinics or doctors' clinics have also gone on board really quickly with this, and everything from installing Zoom to taking your credit card details over the phone. So transformation can happen when the needs are there. What I'm starting to see from the VC side as well is that we're seeing a lot of these digital health technologies being amalgamated and brought up and bought up rather, in terms of, let's say, some of the digital measurement technologies that are coming out there. We're starting to see some of CROs and these types of organizations start to pull those up. I think that's where this is going to get quite exciting, that we really get to a point at which it can transform quite soon. So I think it's really heating up in that area.
Yeah, I'm a great believer myself in alliances and bringing what we call disparate groups or uncommon partners together to advance. And it was Aidan Brown who also mentioned that this morning. It will be very much what dConnect is about, to bring different groups together to innovate. Jim, you're involved, I imagine, in many partnerships as well, at the forefront of some of this technology and some of the advancements that's been mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth is that bringing digital health solutions, to creating them and bringing them to market, actually requires an enormous range of skills and capabilities. And actually, there's very few organizations, large or small, that have everything in-house and do everything kind of inside the walls of their own company. Because you know, you need to think around health economics, behavioral science, technology, cybersecurity, data management, commercialization, you know, operation. All of these things are quite, you know, I require a diverse set of skill sets. The way we would think generally about partnering is if you think about the digital health kind of product creation, solution creation kind of main phases, you know, from that kind of early innovation, science-based research, evidence-based research that leads to kind of a concept around a product that could be useful, through to creating that product as maybe as a medical device, through to then running some clinical investigations to determine whether it's effective and to prove some of the claims you want to make, registering it as a medical device typically, then thinking about how it gets to market. You know, is it, you know, are you going to sell it directly to healthcare providers? Are you going to sell it to payers? Are you going to sell it to large employers? Are you going to sell it to companies? What's the, you know, what's the kind of go-to-market model, and who's going to commercialize it? And then even when you've done all that, you still need to think about, well, you know, because as we all know, digital health solutions are not once-off things. They evolve continuously as technology changes, as you get feedback from patients and from clinicians about how these things work. So kind of right along that kind of creation life cycle, there's opportunities for collaboration, because it's highly unlikely that as any company you're going to think, hey, we can do all of that. And I think the trick then for companies like us is to try and figure out, well, okay, what are we actually best at, and what are the things where are the areas that we should be partnering. And it's in that, and that you know, that enables you to look, I think, at the picture of kind of ecosystem players that you can look to work with, and then try to choose your partners wisely.
I think very important what you mentioned in there is actually liaising with the clinicians and the healthcare providers themselves, so that you are doing that iterative, you know, product development, and you're not moving it away from maybe the end user as the patient or the clinician, and that you're constantly iterating with their voice. I think that you're right. I mean, you're all talking the same thing, where there's a lot of, you know, complexity in a product now, and it can't be produced and brought to market by a sole player. So I'm looking forward to some more partnerships and enabling some of that over the next while. And I think that we as a country have an awful lot of advantages. And one of the reasons, you know, for this type of innovation and the hub is that we have all the capabilities here, you know, through foreign direct investment, but also there's a burgeoning and an exciting kind of startup area where there are a lot of new innovations. What I see is, usually there's maybe, investment, and the investment landscape is not maybe as strong as we might like it to be here. I think that, many of these startups are relying on investment from overseas to advance. And again, ultimately, many of them will be acquired by the large companies and really globalized in that fashion. But many of them do need investment for, the meantime, because they are being asked to prove more and more that their technology is efficacious. And so there's a longer spell between when you come up with the idea and the innovation to when you may be acquired. So a lot more funding. So probably gaps there. Maybe, Anita, you're nodding your head. Can you talk a little bit about that from your own perspective as an early stage company?
Yeah, so when Novalier, we are just about 5 years since we spun out of Dundalk Institute of Technology, and although we are not a medical device development organization, we support the development of medical devices. Obviously, the startup journey for us is somewhat different, but we're still very heavily involved with those connected device companies. In fact, all of our customers are that. But in the case of a startup in the life science space, it's an elongated journey in comparison to what we experienced. And you talk about the investment needs and all of the facets that need to be considered in terms of starting up a company. But the journey from device concept to market approval can, in many cases, be years, particularly considering timeframes for conducting clinical trials to establish safety and efficacy. But also there's so many back office necessary considerations, if you like, for a startup in the life science space to take into consideration before they even get the product to market. And these, back to the conversation about regulations and requirements from a legislative point of view, to market a product. So you'd be considering things like quality management systems, safety, risk management, verification, validation, traceability, security, which is the space that we're involved in, software development, etc. And that's, a very complex web of considerations for an early stage company that are thinking purely from an innovative perspective from the product design, where very often the skill sets and the understanding of that web of regulations isn't built into the skill sets of the founders, which is why I think dConnect has so much to offer in that space in terms of easing the process, or at least educating founders and early stage companies on a path to success in terms of more speedily commercializing innovative and emerging technology.
So yeah, I mean, it is a long road. Maybe, and again, some of the more digitally focused technologies, digital diagnostics and so on, have a shorter path, but regulation and reimbursement still uncertain. So it is a difficult space. But as you say, we have a lot of good expertise, and some of the work that we'd hope to do is support people that are moving through that with a number of different webinars, workshops and programmatic activities. So, being the go-to is our aim. We may not have all the expertise in-house, although there's huge expertise across regulated software from Fergal McCaffrey's group at Dundalk IT, and also from provision of care to seniors. So there's a lot of care, or a lot of knowledge in-house at DKIT. But again, our network and what we're creating is a cluster of experts and businesses that can help others. I guess I wanted, just before, there's a lot of questions, so I'll come to those, and thanks to the audience for asking questions. Just if you have any more questions, pop them in there, now's your opportunity. But it's back to the patient. And I'd like to just maybe go around the house and see, well, what do you see in terms of, we talked about in the very beginning, the change in the way that people will, have their health statistics in front of them, engage with their healthcare professionals. Jim, I'm very interested, because you mentioned this, and I know you're interested in it, in the behavioral science piece. Maybe could you explain a little bit more about what that means in terms of the patient or the change that might happen with digital health?
Yeah, so I guess just at a very broad level, as we mentioned before, I guess there's a kind of I know there's a COVID pandemic, but there's also a chronic disease epidemic that's been going on for a long time and will go on for a lot longer. And you know, most of what healthcare systems deal with is helping people manage their chronic condition. And the reality is, for most chronic conditions, there's a huge behavioral aspect to that, right? It's not just about whatever medication you get. It's also about your lifestyle. It's about the decisions you make about your own health, etc. And I think we can all confess or admit to the fact that even though you know what to do lots of the time, you don't always do it. So the question is, so the question from a behavioral science point of view is, how can you enable people to kind of frame their kind of self-management of their condition in the right kind of way, so that they are motivated to take their medication? And you know, again, the reality, the statistics are that only about 50% of people actually take their medication as directed. So even that very basic thing, you know, when you're given this intervention that, you know, can help manage your condition, half of people, it's not because they forget. I mean, that can be a small aspect of it, but it's not really because they forget. It's because a lot of the time people are, you know, in denial about their condition a little bit. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to have to think about, you know, well, you know, what's the risk of me taking this medication? Will there be side effects that I have to manage? All that kind of stuff. So behavioral science really is about thinking about how to frame the situation for patients so that they make good decisions about managing their own condition. Because a lot of future healthcare is a combination of people making good decisions about their healthcare, and also kind of enabling them to do that by providing good supports, good technologies to do that. So if you're designing a digital health solution and it's around one of the chronic conditions, which it probably is going to be, then a key aspect is thinking about how do patients conceptualize the challenge that they have, and how do they get motivated to do something about it. So building that in, and it's not a pop science thing, it's a real science thing. Building those kind of evidence-based behavioral science interventions into how digital health solutions work is kind of a key piece of actually going back to the adoption question. It's a key piece of getting patients to adopt these types of supports and solutions.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of psychology in there. We all know that we are every day being manipulated by the way our screen is laid out, you know, the way the supermarket is laid out. This is not new, but definitely has a place in terms of helping people to change their behavior or to do things that are more beneficial for themselves. I think compliance, and certainly, you know, so many times I've had to say to people, why are you stopping the antibiotics? You know, you're supposed to run the full course, or I'm feeling better now, so I won't take whatever. Very dangerous, in fact, for maybe chronic illnesses in particular. And just to Lorcan, you know, with your end of things, compliance in terms of clinical trials and beyond, how do you see digital health helping with that?
Yeah, compliance can be quite a challenging piece, and as Jim mentioned earlier, you know, patient compliance to their own medication profiles is not always perfect. Is one of the challenges that we have. And when we go to collect data from these digital health technologies, how can we ensure that patients will wear the devices if we're asking them to wear devices during the clinical trials, or perform these tests if we're asking to perform those tests at home? I think this really does come down to this kind of behavioral science aspect, both across the clinical trials side of things, but also in terms of the clinical practice, and really it comes down to what is the motivation for the patient to be involved here, and how are they benefiting either themselves or society by partaking in this. When we think about it in terms of clinical trials, we can collect these data and we can ensure that patients are wearing the device in practice, and we can ring them if not, understand where the challenges can be. And it comes down to, is this a carrot or a stick argument, and which effort do we really want to take here, right? And for this is really us engaging in wanting to collect the highest quality data that we can collect as part of our clinical trials, so that we can have really relevant conversations back with regulators and try to approve these medications for use in practice. It would be, I think, really remiss if a drug was not brought onto the market because patient data was not perfect in this case, and particularly when we think about these kind of very long drug cycles. The clinical trial or the drug development process can be like 14 to 16 years, right? So it's quite a lengthy duration, and so we do want to collect those data as best as possible. But that carrot approach, I think, should also be taken back with the clinical practice side within the clinical practice side of things as well, really asking patients, and trying to understand how can we get patients to self-manage their conditions as best as possible. Can they really become stewards of their own health, and have this led by themselves as opposed to led by maybe a clinician? And this comes down to what data is collected, what does that data mean back to the patients, and how is this being used to improve their healthcare, and what awareness does the patient have of this? I think we see a lot of research coming out that patients rely on clinicians almost, or some patients, particularly older patients, rely on clinicians almost exclusively to manage their health, and they take minimal ownership of this themselves in certain cases, and that paradigm is beginning to shift. And you see kind of the starts of that in the last few years. I think that's only going to speed up, and at least that's what I hope it is. So I think that's how it's beginning to shift at the moment.
Great. Well, I think I'll turn to some of the questions here. One for you, Anisha, is around the ransomware attacks and cyber vulnerabilities, and how exactly can patients be confident, and how, and you mentioned it earlier, do organizations ensure this? We talked about talent, we talked about engaging, I suppose, other expertise. Have you any advice for people that want to ensure that their technologies and that their products are secure?
Yeah, so there is a lot going on globally around how these technologies are developed in a more secure fashion and then maintained as secure as possible. Nothing can be bulletproof, essentially. But I spoke to maybe some of the regulations that are in place in the US. So, well, anybody selling a device into the US market, there are pre-market and post-market cybersecurity requirements, which are mandatory for manufacturers of such devices. And essentially what that means is that the cybersecurity needs to be a consideration from the get-go. At a concept stage of the development of a product, cybersecurity needs to be a fundamental aspect of that. There are new concepts in place in the industry which falls under the umbrella of those regulations, in terms of, and actually just the other week, President Joe Biden passed an executive order around the notion of software bill of materials. So it's around sharing information between all stakeholders, if that's hospitals, end users, in terms of the makeup of a medical device, so that vulnerabilities known to components of those medical devices can be known quicker within the industry. And so that's the notion of software bill of materials, which is a regulatory requirement. Manufacturers need to compile that and in some cases share that with the hospital, what the makeup of the product is. Also, the idea of coordinated vulnerability disclosures. So when a security researcher, hospital, or regulator, medical device manufacturer become aware of a vulnerability, they need to engage in a process around disclosing that vulnerability to interested parties in terms of who may be at risk should that vulnerability be exploited, which will essentially outline a plan to those stakeholders in terms of what the manufacturer will do by way of mitigating that risk or developing a patch plan. And there are also groups to engage with for all stakeholders in the industry, again, in terms of researchers, healthcare providers, medical device manufacturers, known as information security and analyst organizations, or information sharing analyst organizations. And one such group is Health ISAC. And the concept of these groups are that any issues relating to cybersecurity in terms of vulnerabilities, etc., are shared among that multi-stakeholder group. In in light of one person's attack is another person's defense type strategy. So there's much more movement towards information sharing, de-siloing the environment, understanding the true capability of vulnerabilities in terms of the output by way of risk. And that consolidation in the industry from a de-siloing perspective is it's greatly needed. You can't look at cybersecurity in in a siloed fashion. So there's much more movement towards that in the industry, which also for early stage companies and startups is a really good support mechanism. First of all, participating with one of those groups, such as Health ISAC, reduces the reporting requirements for manufacturers when they do identify vulnerabilities, as long as they're working with ISAs. But it's also a support to those early stage companies in terms of being able to better secure their products through the development lifecycle, or while the products are in use, and if that's on an IT network in a hospital environment, or if it's implanted in a human body.
And actually, there's another question related to it. Is there a percentage of revenue that should be set aside for managing security? It's an ongoing process, as you say. There's always a percentage set aside for R&D and innovation. Is this something that should be budgeted for, and how much should be budgeted?
It absolutely should be budgeted at this point in time. As I mentioned earlier, this is a safety critical industry. It's patients' lives that we're trying to protect and avoid any potential fatalities, but it's also an industry in its infancy, particularly from a regulatory point of view. So, from a budgetary percentage, that's still a wild unknown in the industry, and it would vary significantly between what a healthcare provider would put from that budget perspective to what a medical device manufacturer would. And, saying that the industry is in its infancy, we see huge variation in terms of how cybersecurity programs are stood up from one manufacturer to another manufacturers. We might see, we work with tier one companies, and we might see tier one companies that have an entire cybersecurity program established, so they have significant budgets, whereas you might see in other tier one companies that the budget is minimal. It's split between R&D, it's split between quality, it's split between regulatory. So from understanding a pattern in the industry, who handles it, who's responsible for it, which department should be responsible, what the budgets are, it's still a bit of an unknown at this point in time.
You're on mute, Angela.
Indeed, takes me a minute to get off it. So so thanks very much, Anita. I guess another question, a couple of them maybe related, but a little bit different, looking at social prescribing and the role of maybe voluntary organizations in the support back to the patient, and I guess the ecosystem around them, beyond them having to travel, but caring at home and having support at home as well. So what role do you see maybe for voluntary organizations in supporting patients and people at home, and also in maybe what's the role of social prescribing, and is that something that you've seen used or are aware of? Jim, maybe on your side.
I would say just generally, and it goes back to just from a kind of speaking selfishly from a business perspective, it goes back to the adoption question, right? So if you want to encourage patients and clinicians to use these types of services and solutions that are being created, then groups like patient access groups, patient advocacy groups have a significant role to play, because that's the way, that's where there's a kind of trusted network of patients or care or organizations that kind of understand at a fundamental level, what the challenges are for patients, and what types of things will be useful and what type of things wouldn't be useful. So often when we're looking to create new solutions in an area, we would turn to working with those patient groups and care groups to get a better understanding as to kind of what the real challenges are. And then also they can be, if they're involved in the kind of participating in, contributing to co-creation of those types of services, then they're much more likely to think or to effectively communicate to their network, to their members, to their network, that these things are useful, and so I think there is a significant role there, and I think there's also, apart from solutions that are patient and clinician focused, there's increasingly a number of kind of digital health services and solutions that are kind of care focused as well, because informal carers are a huge part of how of how care is delivered, particularly for particularly ill, particularly vulnerable people. So care is kind of a key part of the mix, and again, that's why we would engage with some of those organizations as well.
Yeah, so I think even the panel probably not as close to the social sector in this side. Certainly at DKIT and with Netwell Casala, a huge focus on elder care or seniors care and community. And myself, particularly my colleague Sarah, working on some of that engagement, and we do even have on the steering committee people that are involved in care. We've run some workshops in looking at provision of digital technologies, and there's a lot of challenges even with engaging and provision of some digital technologies to seniors, but we are certainly focused on that at Dundalk IT and dConnect. I might have to bring this session to a close. Thanks to everybody who posted questions up there, and I know that one of the main concerns is around patient data. I'm not surprised at that, given the recent attacks here in Ireland, and of course it's happened in parallel in California in the healthcare system there, so it's not just here, it happens right across various industries, particularly financial industries, and we all have warnings around fraud. So as things move and the speed of change increases, it is a challenge, and I see it as collaboration, and as Anita mentioned, people working together to keep abreast of it. And to make sure that they're prepared for it. So I'd like to thank all of you. Thanks very much for your time. And it was a very, very useful discussion. Again, if there's anybody in the audience that wants to connect with any of the speakers, do reach out to us at dConnect and we can connect you. Again, that's their job, that's their role. If there's expertise or people that we can connect you with, that's what we'll do. So I'll thanks Anita, Lorcan and Jim, and I'll let you off screen. So very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess from my side, I see Michael popping up there. Did you want to say any words, Michael? You're just coming on screen to wish us well. In the meantime, I'm going to get.
You're on mute, Michael.
No, well, no. Just to say, I actually found it fascinating to listen to, and I suppose it just reinforces the need for dConnect. So no, it was very, very interesting. And if I might just say again, just as a final few words myself, I was just thinking back there on I was looking at our list of benefactors, the County Council, the Enterprise Company, ServiceSource, Statsports, Credit Union, and Louth Enterprise Company, and just thinking that it's not just dConnect that they have helped us with. All of those companies and organizations have been actually so good to Dundalk Institute of Technology over many years. So it's I suppose just I'm saying a further thank you, and again, Angela, to wish you well. That'll be my final comment. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks for your time here today, and for listening in there. I'm just going to share a very quick presentation about dConnect and our capabilities. So just to kind of wrap up really, because you are listening in, wondering a little bit more about what we can provide for you. So it's a digital health innovation hub, and really, helping to support people right across that sector in terms of advancing businesses, but supporting, large and small businesses. Our mission is really to stimulate, foster and enhance innovation, and through collaboration really, and those partnerships that have been talked about throughout, in digital health, for the creation of enterprises, products and services that will address the needs of healthcare in our society. As you know, we have an aging society and the burden of care increases over time. You know, we're building bridges, we're connecting the dots between businesses, large and small, relationships into the healthcare sector, public and private, universities conducting research, and Lorcan mentioned, you know, the large companies looking to smaller companies and also research to advance technologies that they cannot do within house. So all of that is part of what we'll do, creating that cluster across this sector, digital health, connected health, and well-being, to support startups, to support commercialization of research. We saw Anita herself spun out of Dundalk IT, and also provide those larger businesses and investors with access to innovation, innovative products and businesses. And I've stolen this from MIT, but it's their model for innovation, an ecosystem of innovation. And these are the stakeholders, and these are who we are engaging. You know, we've a lot of, you know, entrepreneurs that we've spoken with and have reached out to us. We have, you know, SMEs that we're working with. Some of them are already in healthcare and they're moving towards more digital solutions and are digitizing maybe themselves and changing the way they work and their business models, but also engaging a lot of corporates and bringing, you know, their voice to the table of, you know, what their needs might be. And of course, very, very importantly, our, you know, government who supported us through Enterprise Ireland, and the local government, and a lot of the stakeholders have been mentioned and thanked here. But, you know, the HSE, working with the HSE and, you know, trying to look at how we would collaborate to solve some of the problems that we see there, but also probably sitting under that maybe corporate and SME sector, the public hospitals as well as the private hospitals, who all, you know, have patients to care for and want to do the best they can to advance patient care. Again, we're working not only with the research groups and various different researchers across Dundalk IT, but relationships right across the board, right across Ireland, working with ECH Alliance, which provides us access to countries all across Europe and across the world, in fact. So we're creating a very large ecosystem to enable innovation. And I mentioned the need for investment as well, and showing, you know, some of those new and early stage technologies and innovations to the investment community, for looking for support to advance those here in Ireland. And our key strategies are around building that cluster and then providing a knowledge hub. So being the go-to for people that want some answers, that need some support, to come to us, and we will seek out what we can with maybe some internal expertise. We can provide support, and we have a broad network whereby we can support with the help of other experts that we have engaged. We are very much about job creation. So if that's the, you know, spinning out of technologies from a university setting, if it's, you know, the spin out maybe from an SME into digital healthcare, it may be creation of entirely new businesses and supporting those. And also there's a lot of change happening. It's been mentioned quite a lot. So within the healthcare system, within businesses who are supporting the healthcare system. So digitization and, you know, moving to e-health systems is something that we'd like to, you know, provide assistance with as well. And we are an island, but with a lot of technology capability, a lot of life science, med tech and pharma expertise. And I believe, and so that the rest of the team, that, you know, you should think globally, and our relationships across the water will help us to have businesses who are early stage think about how they, you know, gain regulatory approval and target markets that are beyond Ireland. So the connected cluster is connecting research with corporates, innovation and early stage ventures, and then also connecting maybe startups and SMEs with clinicians and clinical sites and healthcare experts, and also, you know, showing where there are funding opportunities to enterprises, large and small, in fact, you know, across Ireland, and maybe assisting with some of those funding opportunities. And really, you know, anybody with earlier stage ideas, bringing some business strategy to that, and looking at the competitive landscape, and trying to build out, you know, what would look like a best business plan for the technology or the innovation that people are putting forward. And as I mentioned, a knowledge hub. So we provide business mentoring, it could be 1:1. We have programmatic activity, a series of workshops and webinars, which I'll mention, which are open now for enrollment. So please do get on and do enroll in those, because there'll probably be limited spaces, and those opened up for enrollment last week. Again, funding opportunities that, and it's interesting, some companies are not aware of. So we're doing a body of work to look at those and make sure that we're able to show what funding opportunities are relevant for different personnel. We can prototype, so we have an in-house prototyping capability, not just in in terms of a product, but certainly that's a strength, building on some of the capabilities out of Dundalk IT, but within dConnect ourselves, but also business model innovations and prototyping how you would go to market, and trying to navigate through that healthcare system, which we talked about earlier, has challenges in terms of deciphering maybe reimbursement. And I'm very much an advocate, as we had discussed with the panel, of innovation at intersections and bringing disparate groups together to move things forward and to gain knowledge from others that have done something before or are from a different area. We're all about really creating jobs and enterprise, particularly in the region, but right across Ireland. And we provide entrepreneurial support. We help with customer engagement. I think that iterative process, engaging the clinicians, is extremely important, and the patients in terms of end user, to get the product and the service offering correct. We can help with market analysis and honing value propositions and messaging, and getting people ready for investment, and having your story honed for that, for the market and for your investors. And we talked about, and I guess it's digitization or change management overall, as we all in our daily lives have gone more and more digital, particularly in the last 15 months or so. We have a series of workshops, and a lot of them provided by ACH Alliance and some of their partners globally, to bring best practices to people who want to look at how they're going to change their business model, how they're going to change the way that they work in their processes and even in the products that they provide. So we're providing some expertise already, as these are challenges that people are facing right now. And as I mentioned, we've been listening in to decipher what the main challenges are. And again, a big believer in, if someone has expertise in this, in providing that sort of introduction to allow people learn and peer learn from one another. And again, it's really important when you are, if particularly you're an early stage business, like Lorcan mentioned, the challenges of a global business, with the way, each of the different regulatory bodies are quite separate. Each different market has its own nuances. And I myself worked in a large company, and there's definitely a way to approach, going out there and looking at how you would target markets. It's very important that you think about that from the get-go, particularly as an early stage business. But, we at dConnect are, keeping an eye and abreast of the global trends out there. We would see, and I've spoken to people both sides of the water, differences between the US and the way, they push out new technologies and adopt them versus what Europe has been doing. Internationally engaging with people who are, in digital health and healthcare, and understanding, what the systems are like there and how you need to work to approach them, and to have products and technologies rolled out in those locations. Ecosystem, again, through some of our partnerships beyond Ireland into Europe, and also across into the US, and bringing best practices, and also looking at global markets and where you sit. It's really, really important as a company that you look at what else is going on, and you understand what the challenges are and what competition is there for yourself and your business. So please don't be a stranger. This is the dConnect team, myself, my colleague Sarah, who's our community and education manager, Desiree, who's our research innovation specialist, and Surafel, who's our software technician and has expertise, particularly in regulated software. and we'll be able to help you with some of the prototyping activities. We are here to be reached out to. We are all about connecting and supporting. So please, take note of those email addresses, and we're welcoming your emails to us. Any one of us will respond to you. And we have been listening to a lot of different voices, large and small company voices, people, in the healthcare system, and people who are, carers and patients, and understanding, particularly for various different groups, some of the challenges out there. So as I mentioned, we already have a workshop series that's registered, or can be, that you can register right now. It's rolling out. Some of it is around implementing a digital framework, and the digitization and transformation that's occurring, and looking at that and what's happening internationally, and being informed about that, and how you should apply it within your own business. That's happening next week. Obviously, a lot of change occurring around regulation in Europe, and so we put together a webinar around that as well, and bringing in some different experts to talk to you. And if you have questions, it's a great forum to put to some of those people, so do tune in if there are questions that you have around that. And there are a lot of different offerings around in terms of medical device regulation workshops. So if you have any questions outstanding, or you're up against that challenge right now, do tune into that. A lot mentioned around data and data security today, a lot of questions as well put to the panel around that. It is a challenge, it will continue to be a challenge. There are certainly, ways of dealing with it, and I think it's a matter of understanding, out there who has done this well, who are leading in terms of security. So we have a number of workshops around that, around, as Anita mentioned, thinking this way from the get-go, and being aware of how to build your product and your processes and your quality management system, so that you have your ducks in a row from a regulatory perspective, but just from an actual security perspective. So some workshops around that, and looking at the integrity of the data that you collect, and also, there are challenges around maybe the amount of data, but ensuring that you actually are collecting the data, and that actually it is something that can be analysed and useful. And again, later in June, more on moving towards e-health and transformation that's required there, and the best practices internationally. So some of those are open right now. There's more workshops beyond June. I think summer will be a challenge, but do look out on the website, and keep an eye out for the events. We have a lot of events coming up. We're doing a modularized approach to things at the moment, moving later in the year towards programmatic activities. So, keep an eye out, look at the website. You can inquire directly through this, or you can take note of any of our email addresses, or phone us. We're all off site. I know this is a local number, but it will come to our mobile numbers, and we'll be able to respond there as well. So thanks for that. I'm just going to pop to some questions to see if there's anything else outstanding. So I guess, so Andy had mentioned, what is my ask maybe, or what do I ask? I ask that people, do come to us. Our stakeholders locally and nationally have been fantastic. We have huge support right across the sector, from HSE to private hospitals, from corporates to SMEs. We have a strong steering committee, and support to date has been tremendous. I'd like to thank everybody that's been involved from that, but I also really want to thank my team, Sarah, Desiree and Surafel, who absolutely worked really hard for this event and to roll this out. They're a very strong team, and we are more than willing and happy to help anybody that wants. So thanks very much for your time. We ran a little bit over there. So thanks to all the panelists and speakers today as well. I think that's a wrap.